朋友们，这两天我要多多关心一下俄罗斯，因为西方的确有点欺人太甚。我特别期待普京当局能放一个大招。在叙利亚政权失败之后，俄罗斯在叙利亚的军事基地是维持不住了，至少不能全部维持。有的军事基地已经开始逐渐撤兵，在他们离开之后，军事基地不是被叙利亚的反对派占领，也不是被以色列的军队占领，而是被美国人占领了。美国的特种部队在俄罗斯前脚离开之后，立刻就开车进去了。不得不说，在拜登任期的最后一段时间，他对俄罗斯打出了一整套组合拳，威力不俗啊。所以人一旦无所顾忌的时候，还真的威力挺大。现在呢，库尔斯克还没有收复，虽然朝鲜军人已经参战，但依然没有收复库尔斯克。乌克兰军队占领1000多平方公里的土地，现在已经几个月了，依然没有收复。腹地又不断被乌克兰使用短程导弹进行攻击，叙利亚又失去了基地，更加重要的是，它的金融又遭到了人家的打击。就在今天，普京说俄罗斯准备在所有方面进行反击，不仅仅是在战场，要在经济方面，在科技方面，在文化方面，所有领域都要进行反击。所以普京应该是也十分生气。我呢，个人十分赞同俄罗斯进行反击，我也支持他们进行反击。因为西方整个一小撮那些国家真的有点欺人太甚了，他们仗着自己常规武器比俄罗斯强，他不断压缩别人的空间。我甚至都怀疑，在过段期间，如果俄罗斯在欧洲某个国家的驻军也遭到了袭击，或者那个国家发生了政变，你们也不要感到任何惊讶。他们现在是在全世界范围之内把俄罗斯的力量全部剪除。而且这里面还有一点是不平衡的，那就是乌克兰的泽连斯基他没有什么包袱，这个人他不是一个爱国者。很多乌克兰人都认为泽连斯基是一个爱国者，这是不现实的。乌克兰被害成现在这个样子，不就是泽连斯基干的吗？如果有朝一日乌克兰战败，你们认为泽连斯基会与乌克兰共存亡吗？不会，他立刻会在西方的帮助之下流亡，流亡之后依然过着非常富足的生活。毕竟人家已经弄了很多钱，泽连斯基把自己的亲戚都已经安排到了西方发达国家，比如英国、意大利等，所以他怎么可能对乌克兰忠诚？但是普京他没有办法，普京他对俄罗斯感情很深，普京无法抛弃俄罗斯，不一样，所以两个人承担的历史责任是完全不一样的。这就导致泽连斯基什么事情都能干，但普京当局并不是什么事情都能干。我就举一个例子，如果泽连斯基现在手上具有大规模杀伤性武器，而且没有得到明确的限制和命令不许使用，你们认为他会不会对俄罗斯使用？100%会。之前莫斯科发生的数次非常大规模的恐怖主义袭击事件，不就是乌克兰策划的吗？而大规模杀伤性武器俄罗斯有很多，但俄罗斯依然没有使用，这就是不平等啊，对不对？所以我现在呢想说，我明白俄罗斯一直在等待，他在等待特朗普真正掌握权力之后能够帮助俄罗斯解决问题，但是我认为这个等待有点不切实际。原因就是因为 我到现在为止都没有想出来，到底有什么特别强大的动力让特朗普解决俄罗斯的麻烦？除非他是俄罗斯的间谍，否则的话，我的确找不到任何理由，对不对？所以我建议普京放一个大招。普京手里有很多大招。美国能够在二战后期对日本放大招，你为什么不能对乌克兰放大招？都可以放，凭什么呀？是不是？这不仅仅是我个人的看法，也是美国一个非常重要的学者米尔斯海默的看法。所以下半部分你们听一听米尔斯海默是如何说的。
My point to you is that if the Russians are losing in Ukraine, and Ukraine and the West are winning, the Russians, I believe, will initiate nuclear use in Ukraine. And they will do that not only because they think they are facing an existential threat, but also because they will not fear nuclear retaliation from the West.
What if President Biden or Trump, whoever it may be in charge at the time, what if they preempt this by saying, if in that eventuality of Russia starting to lose the war, and it's a big if, by the way, I would clarify that, but if they were to preempt it, preemptively say as President of the United States, warn Russia, if you use a nuclear weapon, we will help Ukraine defend itself with a nuclear weapon, then aren't they putting in the sand there a line of deterrent, which if it gets crossed, everyone understands what happens? Isn't that the only way it actually works? The only way a deterrent actually works is if the other side believes that you're going to use the same thing, or worse.
But you're assuming that the other side, which is the Russians in this case, would believe that threat. And I don't believe they would believe that threat.
Well, I think they'd have
call
to.
America's bluff.
I think if you're America, you're going to have to want them to believe that threat. You've got to want them to believe you're serious. Otherwise, I just cannot picture a situation where unleash a nuclear attack on a European country and America just doesn't respond in kind. There's no deterrent there. That's basically saying to Putin, you can use your nukes whenever you want against any country you like, and we, the great superpower of the world, will just stand by and let you do it. And we may attack you conventionally, but that is not going to be a like for like, and that's not going to be a deterrent, is what I think.
If you're a member of NATO, which Ukraine is not, you have an Article 5 guarantee, and you are depending on the American nuclear deterrent to provide security for you. So if a NATO country is attacked with nuclear weapons, there is some reasonable chance the United States will use nuclear weapons to defend that NATO country. But Ukraine is not a member of NATO, and Ukraine is not of great strategic importance to the United States. And therefore, the United States is not going to risk nuclear war to save Ukraine.
I mean,
it's that simple.
It wasn't a nuclear scenario, but when you look at what happened with the first invasion of Kuwait by Saddam Hussein, Kuwait was not a member of NATO, and yet America immediately sent boots on the ground to repel Saddam from Kuwait. I'm not sure there's a massive difference between Kuwait and the influence of that to America and the West and Ukraine, a massive sovereign democratic European country. It's been invaded by and America didn't hesitate to kick Saddam out of Kuwait.
There's a huge difference between these two scenarios. There was no threat of nuclear war with regard to
No, I said it wasn't
Kuwait.
a nuclear situation.
The scenario that you're describing with regard to Ukraine involves nuclear weapons.
I think
you don't fully understand.
Let me clarify.
Just what we're talking about here. We're talking about nuclear weapons. We're talking about nuclear war.
Professor,
the United States of America does not take this threat lightly. This is a threat of huge magnitude. We're talking about getting possibly incinerated.
I think you misheard what I said. I deliberately said it. I know it's not a nuclear situation. The point being, why should America defend Ukraine given it's not a NATO country? And I would say, well, nor was Kuwait a NATO country, but America did send boots on the ground there to kick out Saddam Hussein. Ideologically, what is the difference actually between defending Kuwait against Saddam and defending Ukraine against Vladimir, however you end up doing it?
We're just not talking about defending Ukraine and defending Kuwait. We're talking about using nuclear weapons. We're talking about nuclear war. We're talking about the possibility of getting incinerated. This is not a matter one should take lightly. And you only use nuclear weapons under the most extreme circumstances. The United States would only use nuclear weapons if its survival was threatened. And the idea that conquering Ukraine or dropping a nuclear weapon on Ukraine threatens their survival and therefore should precipitate a nuclear war is, I think, not a smart argument. The fact is that if the Russians were to use nuclear weapons, the United States would not respond by precipitating a general nuclear war.
Then Putin wins, right?
Might win. That's right. And you want to remember that if you look at what's happening in the conventional war, it looks like Putin's going to win, despite the fact that we've now passed this large-scale arms package for Ukraine. Putin is likely to win.
Why is that not a terrible thing for America and the West?
Because you have to prioritize the threats that you face in the world. And the fact of the matter is that what happens in Ukraine does not matter that much to the United States. I know for people like you, this is a life and death matter. The thought of any country on the planet that the West defends losing is a major defeat and has catastrophic consequences. I mean, you felt this way about us pulling out of Afghanistan. But I think that places like Afghanistan, even places like Ukraine, don't matter that much.
Actually, on that, I didn't really. I felt with Afghanistan, America should have kept a small military presence there to maintain some kind of order. And I think I was justified in saying that, given what's happened since. I thought throwing the country back to the Taliban was a catastrophic error of judgment, and it wouldn't have happened in the way it's happened if America kept a couple of thousand troops there, as it does all around the world in endless bases. So it seemed to me, having done many, many years of hard work in Afghanistan as a response to 9/11, to then simply just overnight throw everybody out and leave the country to the Taliban, particularly for women's rights, never mind anything else, I thought was an abrogation of America's duty, and the UK.
Right, but this is your worldview, which is the United States has a responsibility to be everywhere and
not
to
everywhere,
never quit until
but they should certainly be preserving freedom and democracy. Otherwise, why self-style yourself as leader of the free world? You either are leader of the free world, and America still has, I think, half the world's military firepower, and obviously one of the biggest economies. You either are that entity, leader of the free world, or you're not. And if you are, then what comes with that is a responsibility to protect freedom and democracy when it comes under attack from, I would think.
I think if you look at the history of American foreign policy, it's very hard to make the case that our principal goal has been to protect freedom and democracy. The United States has a rich history of overthrowing democracies around the world, and we have a rich history of siding with some of the world's biggest dictators. So this idea that we're out there protecting freedom and democracy and it's our principal goal, in my opinion, doesn't mesh with reality.